Welcome back to the channel, everybody. I'm Trevor with Maker Experiment, and in today's video, I'm going to be covering how to price your work. Let's get into it. I've been getting a lot of questions lately about what I charge for my work, how I price things out, how I quote them, and those types of questions in general. And while I'm not going to tell you exactly how I price my work as far as what my price is per a project, because it varies depending on what it is, I will give you a formula or quote sheet basically that will walk you through this. If you want to follow along, I actually put a link in the description below where you can download a quote template that I have built that I use for every one of my jobs. Now, this quote is for a single piece item, so in my case, mostly custom sign work, and it's built for that purpose, but you can use it for other projects that are not signs because of how I broke it down. When I build a quote, I like to break it down into 7 different categories of cost. These 7 categories are materials, consumables, my marketing supplies, my packaging supplies, my machining cost, my labor cost, and then my shop fee. I am going to walk through what each of these is, but as a general sense, it's going to encompass everything that you use to make a product and ship that product. So it's everything from start to finish. But let's go through my basic definitions of what these categories are. First up is my materials. So materials are going to be anything that is visual and shipped with the sign. These are things like wood, acrylic. It's going to be like your sign hangers. If you're making different things like key rings, it'll be the keyring hardware or earring hardware, that type of item. This is going to be anything that is physically attached to the product or visible on the product that will be used in that process. Even paint can be considered part of your materials. Next up is consumables. Consumables are going to be the things that are used in the process of making that item that are not actually either shipped with the item or not visible on the item. These are going to be things such as glue, sandpaper. They could be the gloves you're using while you're working or shop towels while you're working. Pretty much any incidental shop item that you're going to be using during the process. You don't want to overlook these things because they can quickly add up. Now, you can divvy up the cost over multiple projects if you want to do it that way, but definitely don't forget to account for it. The third one is my marketing material. So in this case, it's going to be things like business cards or stickers, flyers, whatever they may be. Now, if you are in a larger company where you have a marketing budget, the marketing budget would cover these items. If you're like me and you're a small business owner that doesn't really have a marketing budget per se, or that marketing budget goes towards ads on Facebook or Google, wherever it may be, you want to make sure you at least break even on these items. So I don't charge more than what they cost. I just put in the exact cost that I paid. For these items, I just want to break even so that I don't lose money. The next one is packaging supplies. Now, packaging supplies can add up depending on what you're doing. So for something small, it may not be that expensive, but for larger things, it can get to be quite pricey, especially because boxes alone just cost a lot of money when they're larger sizes. Packaging supplies are going to be things such as bubble wrap or craft paper. They could be the packaging tape, the box you're shipping it in. Any of that information would go into this. Now, if you bought packaging tape on a previous project or you're doing something just like shop supplies, you can divvy the cost up over multiple projects because it's only going to be about 1 to 2 strips of tape, maybe a little bit more. And they usually come in a 100-foot roll or 75-foot roll. But you want to make sure that you account for all of these items in your shipping packaging supplies. Next is going to be your machining cost. For when I do machining cost, I really only account for the cost to run the machine. Now, I don't typically do it's $150 per minute. Now, this does end up equating to a per minute basis if you're doing just a service. So if you're doing a laser engraving service, you would calculate your labor rate with your machine cost, and you could break it all down into a per minute or per hour rate. So there is a way to do that through this sheet, but when I'm talking about machining costs, it's just the cost of operating the machine electrically, or the power consumption. So for this, there is a formula that you can use. So I'm going to read it out here. The formula is going to be your max power wattage. So this is going to be something usually found in the user manual that will tell you the max wattage that your machine can pull while it is operating. Then you want to multiply that by your power cost in kilowatt per hour. This cost can be found on your utility bill. This one is going to be something to the effect of maybe 11 cents or 12 cents or whatever per kilowatt hour. Depending on where you're located, this cost can vary pretty drastically. I know that mine is about 11 cents per kilowatt hour. I know some people who have a lot less at 6, some people have higher. It just depends on your area. You want to take the value of those two multiplied together and divide it by 1,000. Then, after you do that, multiply it by the number of hours that your job is going to take. So if you're going to take 1 hour, you multiply it by 1, 2 hours, multiply it by 2, so on and so forth. This will equate to a cost per hour or minute or whatever you use to run the machine. Now, in my case, it's less than $1 in most cases to run the laser. But you want to make sure you account for everything that goes into running the laser. This would be the laser itself, the exhaust fan, the compressor for air assist, your computer that you're running the files with, and if you have a water-cooled system, you would need the water chiller as well. All of these things together are going to make up your machining cost, and make sure that you are accounting for them appropriately. Next is your labor rate. I've seen prices anywhere from $7 an hour, which don't ever do that. Don't go below minimum wage, all the way up to hundreds of dollars an hour. So if you think about it from a professional standpoint, if you work in a career or a day job, you are paid some rate per hour. Now, this is a good guideline for you to use as a reference. I wouldn't say make your hourly rate or your labor rate the same as what you make in your day job, because ideally, right, you want to be able to get out of your day job if you're trying to make this a full-time thing. And if you're trying to do that, you're going to have to make a little bit more, or maybe even substantially more than you make in your day job. So what I did when I made mine is I took my labor rate per hour for what I make at my day job, and then I figured out what I wanted my labor rate to be for the side hustle company that I am trying to build. As an example, if you make $20 an hour during your day job, maybe you want to make your hourly rate $30 an hour. If it's at 10, maybe you want to make it 20. If it's 40, maybe 50. It just depends on you and what you want it to make. The most important thing is that you charge what you feel you and your work is worth. Now, I will tell you, almost every single person, you are worth more than you think you are. Now, when you're first getting started, it is assumed that you're not going to be able to charge as much when you're first getting started as when you are 7 years in. As you progress and you get better and you're doing more and you're learning and you become proficient and an expert, you're going to be able to charge a much higher rate than when you first started. Just like if you're at your day job and you go at the end of the year and you get a raise, you want to make sure that you give yourself a labor rate raise every single year. And the last category is the shop fee. The shop fee can basically be seen as an uh-oh fee. This is a fee that you apply to things that can be miscalculated or messed up during the process. A good way to think about this is if you have bought flooring pretty much ever, they tell you to buy about 20% more than what you think you need because you could have either calculated the square footage wrong or some of the boards may be messed up in the box, whatever it may be. It could also be a user error where they cut it incorrectly and they want to have a little bit of a buffer on the back end so that they don't have to halt the job, go out, buy more, and come back. So if you are buying, say, wood, for example, if you're buying lumber in board feet and you need 10, maybe you actually want to buy 12 or 13. You want to buy about 20% more than what you think you need, or at least quote it as 20% more than what you think you need. Same goes for paint or anything that is attributed to materials, consumables, your machine rate, or your labor rate. Now, I do not do this for my packaging or marketing because I order those from a separate third party and I never have problems. And if I do, I can basically go back to them and say, hey, this was messed up, and they will replace it. Now, the things that you're going to be using or machining are going to be the things you need to add that shop fee to. There's nothing like going through a project, cutting up all the material to find out you cut, 15 board feet the wrong length. It's not a good feeling. It never feels good to have it happen. But by having that shop fee built into your quote, you're not going to lose money on the job unless you mess up more than 20%. It's always a good idea to have that buffer on your quote. Now, some people may not like to have it. I've seen some people say they don't like to do that. You can term it something else if you want to, but keep in mind that on this sheet that I am sharing with you, this is for your internal company use. I do not communicate this to the client. So I don't break it down into, oh, I'm going to use this spray paint, it costs this much. I'm going to use this primer, it costs this much. I'm not going to share that information with the customer. The customer quote is going to be, this is the cost of the sign, this is the cost of the shipping, this is your final cost after tax if there's a tax to it, and that's going to be their quote. My quote internally, so that I know what my original costs are, all calculated together, is going to be this sheet that I put together. Now that I've covered what the 7 categories are, I'm going to go ahead and show you in a sample sheet, fill one out completely. So I have pre-filled one out and I'm going to talk you through it just so it gives you a better understanding of my thought process when I built this sheet. With that in mind, you can go to the link in the description below and download the file for this. So there should be 2 files. If you downloaded it, there will be the blank one that you could fill out yourself, and there will be one that is completely filled in already. If you are using Excel or you do not have Excel, you can actually take the Excel file, put it into Google Drive, and it will convert it to an Excel sheet document, and then you can work on it in there. So with that in mind, let's go over to the computer and I will show you how I build a quote. Now that I have the sheet pulled up, let's go ahead and take a look. All right, here I have an example quote filled out. So I need to put in my customer name, their address, and their email. This information is important because you're going to need the address for estimating any shipping cost, and you're going to need their email to send them the actual quote. Next, I step into my first 2 categories, which are my materials and my consumables. These are going to be anything you use to make the actual sign. Now, if I switch over to the quote template, you'll see that there are only 4 lines included. If you need to add one in, you can just right-click on the bottommost one, say Insert Above, and all of the formulas should update accordingly. If you insert it below or somewhere else, you will need to check the formulas down here at the bottom under total cost to make sure that all of the formulas are calculating everything correctly. Flipping back to my example quote, in this case, I am going to be making a custom sign. For that, I'm going to be using MDF. In this case, I am accounting for the full cost of a sheet of MDF, not just a part of the material in case I don't end up using it later. I'm going to be using a can of black spray paint, a can of white spray paint, primer, sandpaper, and glue. So these are all of the items that I'm going to need to make the actual sign. I don't plan on using gloves or anything else in this case. So this is what it's going to be. My next category is my shipping supplies. In this case, I'm going to have my shipping box and then my shipping material. In this case, I'm saying it's going to be foam. This could be bubble wrap or craft paper, tissue paper, whatever it may be. For me, I try to use foam because I feel it's more secure. So I'm going to put in the amount of sheets I need for the foam, the cost per piece, and it will calculate out to the right my total cost. Next, I have my marketing items. For this, I'm only going to put in a business card and a sticker. So over here on the right, I'm putting in just the cost of those items to me. These are not inflated in any way. These are the exact cost that I paid for the item just so that I break even. Next, I have all of my machining costs. So for this process, I'm going to be using my laser. If you're using table saws or band saws, whatever you may be using, you would put those items here. So for me, I have my laser, my exhaust fan, my air assist, and my computer. I have done all the calculations for an hourly rate, and I expect this to take about 1 hour to complete, which will give me a total cost of about 43 cents per hour. Next, I have my labor costs. So in this case, I'm saying it's going to be $40 an hour. This is just a rate that I put in here. I think it will take about 2 hours, and that will give me a total cost of $80. And at the bottom here, I have all of my total costs calculated. So my total materials are about $44.51. For this, I'm going to add the shop fee to make sure that I account for a 20% waste rate to give me a total cost of $53.41. My shipping and marketing supplies, I am not going to add the shop fee to, so they're going to be $22 and $1.75 respectively. My total machining cost is 43 cents. I'm going to account for a shop fee on that of 9 cents to give me a total of 51. And then for my labor rate, I'm saying it's going to cost $80. The shop fee is $16 in case I underestimated how long it will take, which will give me a total cost of $96. All in all, this gives me a total cost of making the sign of $173.68. Now, you may be asking yourself, wow, that is expensive compared to what I see on Etsy, or it's just more than you thought it would be. Keep in mind that this is the actual cost you expect it to be for you to fully make the sign. Now, if there's something in quantity that you've done a lot of design work for in the past, you won't really have a cost that's as high, because in this labor rate, I'm accounting for my design cost, I'm accounting for the assembly, the painting, everything that is associated with that. So even if you look at that price and you're like, wow, that costs more than I thought. Well, I mean, this should be an eye-opener to some extent of how much it's really costing you to do this stuff, and you need to plan accordingly. So with this cost in mind, I'm going to do the markup in order to actually bring money in or profit into the business. So for this, I use pretty much the industry standard, which is 2 times your cost equals your markup. So in this case, that's going to be a total of $347.35. This is the cost that you're going to want to actually sell the sign for. With that, you're going to also want to add your shipping costs. So in this case, I'm saying it's going to cost $30. I want to make sure to add those two together to give me a total selling cost of $377.35. From this, the estimated profit is $173.68. When you're looking at this, this may seem high compared to competitors. It may seem higher than you expected, but you also need to remember the whole point of this exercise is to pay yourself what you are worth and what your work is worth based on the actual costs that you incur, the actual amount of time you put in, and it's based off actual factual data. It's not just a number you threw up out of the air. You didn't just look at a sign and say, oh, that's going to cost 150 bucks. You put in all the effort to account for all of the paint and the materials and everything else. If you feel it's too high or you need to do a second check, just go through it again, look at all of your costs. If you want to do it by, instead of buying the full sheet of MDF, you just want to cost it out for the pieces you're going to use, you can do that. It's completely up to you. But I encourage you to go through this worksheet and account for the cost as they are, and not try to just look at the final and then undercut yourself. You don't want to look at the final cost of, say, $377.35 and say, oh, nobody's going to pay that, I'll make it, $300. Well, that just took $70 off your profit because you didn't want to try it that way. Now, I will say, if you are experiencing a lot of no's when you send out your quotes, maybe you need to go back and look at your labor rates or the costs you're associating with it and see if you need to change them. When you're building a quote and you're getting responses back, you should get some yeses and some no's, about a 50-50 either way. You shouldn't be getting all yeses because you don't want everyone to say yes, because that means your prices are too low. You don't want to get 100% no's because that means your prices are too high for what people are willing to pay. You don't really know what people are willing to pay. You know what it's going to cost you to make. You need to put yourself out there and you need to take that chance that somebody might say no. And that's okay because it's part of business. And so when you're building these quotes, just be confident with your pricing, be confident with what you're putting out there. And if somebody is asking for a quote for MDF, maybe give them a quote for MDF, acrylic, and maybe a third material. That way they get a few different options and they can see that maybe going with MDF is the right one for them, or maybe they want to upgrade and go to an acrylic one. If you have any questions about the sheet or what I do, I'd be happy to answer those as they come. I'm not going to tell you my actual labor rate because I feel that that's something that you need to figure out for yourself, where you need to figure out what you're worth. Now, I've been doing custom signs and laser work for 7 or 8 years, so I have raised my price over the years. I started really low and I've started to raise it up. All I ask that you do is kind of think about what you make in your day job, if you have a day job, or what you think you should make in a day job if you don't have one, and then maybe bump it up a little bit and use that as your labor rate. One thing I encourage you to do is when you're costing this stuff out and you come up with a quote, be confident in your quote. You need to go into this and say, yes, this is my price. This is what I am worth. The minute you start to lower your price or compromise your pricing to try and get a customer is your first step to basically putting yourself out of business. It's not something you want to do because you're trying to build a business and you're trying to be profitable and be able to invest in things. Without charging an appropriate price, you're never going to be able to do it. If you always compromise based on what other people are charging or what your customer tells you they'll pay, you're not going to make it in the long run. What I will say is you need to make sure that you price to a point where you are getting some yeses and some nos. You can always offer, say, coupons or discounts if you want to, that can help apply to that, but I encourage you to use whatever you come up with as your price as your price. There will always be somebody that will do it cheaper. That's just the way of the world. If you check Etsy, any custom sign on Etsy is going to be probably a lot less expensive than what you're going to charge without Etsy. And there's a lot of factors that play into this. There's people that don't care about their labor rate and they don't care about making money. They just want to do it as a hobby and basically stay afloat. And then there's going to be people from different countries that just try to undersell you and basically undercut you to get your business. Now, I personally have stopped using Etsy for that reason, and I have chosen to use my own website. I will say that since I have switched to this method, of putting all my costs out there and actually charging what I am worth. I've still had the same success rate as I did before because I have started to build a reputation for quality work and what I feel is a great product. People are going to come to you for your reputation and what you do, and they're going to trust in what you make. And you need to make sure that you get paid appropriately. Hopefully this video has been helpful. If you haven't done so yet, go ahead and download the files below so that you can just use them on your own. They are completely free and yours to use as needed. If you like the video and you learned something from it, I just ask that you like the video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so that it can help me grow my channel. I want to thank you for taking the time to watch this video, and I'll see you in the next one.